All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Nadeem Sikander. This presentation is about child's developing brain. We'll talk a little bit about just as a general overview of the developing brain of children. My email address is right on the screen, dr.nsikander@gmail.com. If you ever want to email me or have any other questions. Let's get to what we will be learning in this session, how brain development is designed, which is to form connections, which is also known as the human connectome. How brain connections relate to brain function and the adolescent brain, why teens are so difficult. And there is an actual study that's being going on in the UCLA regarding brain development and aging that you may want to look into it. So let's look at those are the objectives that we will be covering. So first of all, one thing to just kind of demystify is that brain is not just about size. So the brain development is all about forming connections. Um, we are born with more brain cells than we needed, and it is in two critical periods of development, brain cells, which is also known as neurons, are pruned. Those are connected and functioning, stays and elaborate, and those who are unused retract and die. Uh, you have heard the term use it or lose it. In this way, there is an important relationship between environment, what our brains are exposed to, and what we do with them, and the brain development. So let's look at the fetal brain growth first of all. We're looking at 29 days. If you look at the top row, 29 days, 33 days, 52 days, 59 days. That's the beginning of the brain growth from the 29 days. And then 70 days, 20 weeks, 6 months, 9 months. And then at the bottom row, you're looking at the young child, teenager, and adult brain. Now, if you look at the 9 month period, you're looking at pretty much the brain is fully in actual form, and of course there is further development as the child is in his infancy and is in that age, and then turning into a teenager and then to an adult. Um, so when we look at some of the major brain changes, which is also known to be proliferation of dendritic branches, uh, brain cells sprout branches that connects one cell to many others. Myelination is covering the axon major branch that connects neurons with myelin, a fatty substance formed from a specific type of brain cell that allows for a rapid movement of the brain electrical signals. We'll talk a little bit about it in the future slides. And then you have pruning, dying of the brain cells and connections that do not get to use. Okay, so this is what we're looking at, neurons and their connections. We're looking at an actual image of newborn brain connection on the left side of this slide. On the one part, you're looking at the newborn. On the opposite side, you're looking at the adult brain. In between, you have a month old, 9 months old, and the 2 years. And you could see how the network is, how the connections are forming, how neurons are building their connections, and how it is all just becoming more complex web as you grow older. Gray matter thinning, which is neural loss, you're looking at the gray matter thinning process. You're looking at 7 years old, and you're also looking at 30 years old. As you grow older, you have the gray matter that continue to thin over the course of time. Now this slide, you're looking at the gray matter volume, and as you can see, from the darker it gets, the more you head towards the age. At the 20 years mark, your network is fully in sort of in connection. Your neurons are fully formed and connecting, as compared to when you're 5 years old. The networks are not as strong. So this is an actually MRI scans of brain development. You're looking at 1 week old, 3 months old, 1 year old, 2 years old, and 10 years. Now, MRI scans of human brain development. So if you notice the first week, right, the scan you're looking at the extreme left, that's the 1 week brain scan, okay, MRI scan. But as the course of time, you're looking at the gray matter. The brain is shaping up differently as it grows older, and as you can see, the gray matter, as it thins, you see the darker towards more when the brain is 1 week old. 3 months, as you can see a little bit of the difference. 1 year, you completely see a very different gray matter, and then the 2 years and the 10 years. And as you can also see, the development of the size as well. We were talking about myelin speed demon white matter, which is myelin sheath. This is the fatty white wrapper around the connection fibers, allow rapid movement information, just like insulation around the electrical cord. So you're looking at this myelin sheath, which is actually this, where it covers the actual the axon, and then you're looking at the nodes here, right? So what this fatty substance does is it wraps around the cable, just like electrical cord is being wrapped around by the insulation of a plastic, uh, you know, insulation, and that is to do what it actually helps with the communication. It helps with the movement of the neurons. A white matter growth, this is 7 years old, as you can see on the left side, and then you're looking at the right side, that's 30 years old when you're looking at the white matter growth over the course of time. Increased connection across hemispheres, you're looking at 7 years old on the left side, and you're looking at the 30 years old brain scan on the right side. Now, if you note, there is a thicker corpus callosum in between right here. That's where the arrows are pointing, right? You can see the corpus callosum, the thicker corpus callosum on the right side, where the 30 years old is, right, which connects the hemispheres in adults. It gets thicker as you grow older, right? So what it does is it actually connects the two hemispheres, and that's the role of corpus callosum. We're looking at an infant and adult a brain image. These are all the colors that shows you various different networks. They're all light up, and that's how complex of the networking is inside the brain. Functional networks, we'll talk about that. Networks are a group of brain regions that work together to perform tasks. So one thing we understand is the groups of brain regions. You can think of these pockets of brains, and what they do is they work together to perform certain tasks, right? You have a visual network, right? You have auditory network, of course, has to do with auditory sensory network, language network. You have attention network in your brain, and you have salience network, the network that talks about what is important, right? What is important or what is pressing, right? And default mode network, and that is what to do when the brain is resting off, right? That's the functional networks. Now, what fMRI is about is it actually, what that does is it actually measures the blood flow in the brain during a task performance. So when the fMRIs are done, and you're given a task to do, what the fMRI does is it actually scans what the brain is doing, and it actually scans the blood flow in your brain. It also measures correlated activity. the activity that correlates across the brain networks at rest. Okay, and it is safe for children, and fMRI shows the basic outlines of the brain networks at birth. Even at birth, it actually shows the brain networks basically outlining it. Now, this is, we just talked about it, but I'm looking at the 8 weeks old fMRI scan. You're looking at sensory motor network. You are looking at auditory network, visual network, and salience network. Now you can clearly see that where these networks are light up. These are where we were saying that um, there are across the brain networks activities, right? And that's what you're looking at. This is 8 week old fMRI scan, and that 8 week old child brain is being gone through an fMRI to see there are it shows the brain network at birth, and then you see the activities across the networks. And you're looking at the visual networks. Obviously that has to do with what do you, when you see something, and that's the visual part, and then you have the salience. And if you notice, the visual network is in the back side of your head, right in the back of the visual, where your eyes are, and then you're looking at the back of it. That's where the visual network is, which is obviously the sensitive area. So moving forward, how do network actually develop? So let's look at the development of networks. There is basic structure we're all born with. That's number one. Number two is the networks are shaped by experiences, right? It begins more diffusely, but become more distinct modules, highly integrated and more specialized. How? Shaped by experiences. So the more experiences you have, the that the brain is the networks are shaped with those experiences, right? And if you look at, as an example, language activity in children versus adult networks sharpens, right? So if you look at the child group on the top row right up here, you're looking at uh, acquisition of a language which is high in children versus young adult group. So the younger the children are, the more ability that their brain has to acquire a language. Activation and connection in these networks, we're looking at abnormal reward network responses in autism. You're looking at the typical brain, and then you're looking at the autism area. So it kind of tells you, the difference between the two, and why there are further details about the autistic scans, and that's another session for another time. Um, Looking at the typical brain, here you're looking at, on the top row, you're looking at typical brain, 9 months brain, different images, different scans. But if you look at the 9 month at the bottom image, and that image is someone who has severe alcohol exposure. So um, a woman who has been drinking a lot, with the severe alcohol exposure, there's a difference between the brain growth of the child. And if you go across the images, you'll see the difference. On the top, it's a typical brain of the child, but at the bottom, you're looking at a very different images. Actually, the size is different, so is the shape is a bit different. So you see a little bit of um, you're looking at a little bit of the deformation of the brain when someone who's heavily exposed to alcohol and drinking during pregnancy and whatnot. So when now in the last few slides, we're going to a little bit look at the teenage, and the changes, right? So a lot gets changed when the teenagers' brain are being studied. You're looking at the brains becoming very sensitive to, for example, rewards. So brains are very sensitive to reward with teenagers. The teen brains are driven towards novelty and to social experience. Their brains are also, the networks are involved in emotion regulation and impulse control, and they're not well developed until much later. So knowing this, that they are sensitive to reward, their brains are driven towards novelty and social experiences, and their networks involve emotion regulation and impulse control are not fully developed. So then I think then there's a method to the madness, and that's how you learn to deal with that age group. Obviously learn it to do differently. In conclusion, much of what we know, we actually do not know a lot more than what we need to know. Um, how does the connectome develop over time? We're still learning. How do individual differences in connections relate to behavior, cognitive strengths, and weaknesses? That's also out there to learn more about it. How do individual experiences affect the connectome, human connectome, the brain connectome? When we say human connectome, and how do individual experiences affect those, and what are the effects of video games and social media exposures on brain and social development? That is still out there for us to learn a lot more. What are the effects of environmental exposures on brain connections? So there's a lot more for us to learn, but I think as we're moving forward, there are experts who are working towards it. Last but not least, folks, do something today that your future self will thank you for. Our actions and decisions today will shape the way we will be living in future. I thank you all very much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the night. We'll see you in the next session. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.